Chapters 11 and 12 of Vinegar Boy. Remember when we left yesterday, John and Mary were with Vinegar Boy in Mary's little gardens, and the bell tinkled on the gate, indicating someone was coming in. So that's where we pick up. John greeted the tall, somberly dressed man who entered. Vinegar Boy noticed that the visitor's dark eyebrows were thick and bushy, like those of Nicholas, and the eyes that glowed beneath them were bright with wisdom. Mary did not look up as the men conversed in low tones. The boy caught a few fragments of the conversation. Pilate has given permission to take the body. It must be removed from the cross before the sun sets. Nicodemus and I will prepare it together. It shall be placed in my own tomb in the garden beyond the hill. John came to Mary. Mother, Joseph of Arimathea is here. He is a friend of ours. He's going to take care of the burial. Another counselor named Nicodemus is going to help. Mother, do you hear me? Is this to your desire? She nodded. Joseph moved nearer, and the men spoke openly. There is the matter of preparing the body, John. I have linen and some spices that I wish to supply. Nicodemus has myrrh, but he would like to mix it with aloes, and the shops are closed. Vinegar Boy couldn't keep from speaking up. Aloes? Nicholas has a store of aloes at the commissary. He uses them to revive the older hops. I'm sure he would let me have some. God be praised, Joseph said. Nicodemus insists that this be his portion, but I will go with you to make pledge of his payment in his name. Nicholas will trust you, sir, and I can go faster alone. Should I bring the aloes here or take them to the hill? To the hill, Joseph said. The tomb is in the burial gardens beyond Golgotha. But John disagreed. I think you should come back here. If your steward cannot give us the supply, we may be able to get a pharmacist to open his shop. Vinegar Boy knelt for a quick drink from the pool. He could see the reflection of his face in the clear water, the fair cheek and the dark cheek. And suddenly, he was sorry that he had said he would go to the fortress for the aloes. He should be on his way back to the hill. He had probably lost his chance for a miracle. The scourging had weakened the Nazarene, and he would not remain conscious as long as the big outlaw or the young one. But there was no need to cry about the lost chance. Mary and John needed help, and Jesus had to be buried properly. When he was outside the garden, he began to limp. His toes were blistering too. The highway back to the city was a channel of heat, and the stones, hot as griddles, burned through the soles of his boots. He ran when he could and finally entered the city by a small pedestrian gate east of the north portals. The gate opened on a crooked, sunless street, and he stopped immediately and unlaced his boots. Tying the latches together, he draped them about his neck. He could go directly to the fortress from here, or he could take a quicker, unlawful route that would take him past the alley where Barabbas was hiding. The stairs never frightened him as much as when he was climbing them. He wondered if Barabbas was still under the steps. He was probably suffering with thirst. Vinegar Boy made a quick decision. He would take the quicker way and use the minutes he saved to see about Barabbas. He began to run. Coming to a pink stucco tenement, several doors of which opened on the street, he dashed through the middle door and up the stairs as if he belonged there. Up 3 flights he went. The corridors were laid with cheap tile, and his feet slapped happily as he ran. Food smells came from the open doorways, and he heard a mother admonishing her child to clean the radishes, not eat them. His mouth watered at the thoughts of a crisp radish. The first hunger of the day had left, but the smell of the food brought the pangs back. On the 3rd floor, at the end of the corridor, a window with a wide ledge opened to the flat roof of a lower story a few feet below. He crawled out on the ledge and was preparing to jump to the roof below when a woman came out of a door behind him and screamed like an angry camel. "Thief! Thief!" Vinegar Boy clutched his boots against him and dropped. Landing as lightly as Sparrow, he dashed for the outside stairway that led from the 2-story dwelling into a courtyard below. A gate at the far end of the yard led into the street of basket makers, and that street turned and twisted toward the Dolphin Square. He had forgotten about the soldiers looking for Barabbas until he saw 2 of them patrolling the square. Slowing to a walk, he made sure that no one saw him as he slipped into the alley. After the fragrance of the smell of the small garden in Mary's village, The stench of the alley and the humid heat were almost overpowering. A stream of sunlight flowed down the broken stairway, and he noticed the line of ants making their way up the building. Slipping behind the stones holding the steps, he saw that the old door had not been disturbed. The bars were still up, and his heart lifted in relief. Pressing his face close to the cracks, he whispered, "Barabbas?" He heard a scraping sound, and a monstrous, hairy insect with an eye of red fire appeared in the crack almost against his face. He fell back with a gasp. "Is that you, boy?" Vinegar Boy drew a breath of relief. The insect was really only the outlaw's eyebrow and bloodshot eye. "It's me." "So you did come back." "I said I would, but I didn't come to get you. It isn't even noon yet. Are you all right?" "Yes." "What about your face, boy? Did he fix it?" "Not yet. I haven't been able to ask him. He did some things for other people, though. I have to go back to the fort, and then I'm going back to the hill." "How did it go with Dismas?" "He didn't fight. The big one gave them a hard time, but your friend asked if he could be hung so he could see the setting sun, and the centurion said he could." "Listen, boy, can you do something else for me? I've always told Dismas that I would see that he had a proper grave. There's a place in the hills where he always went at sundown. I can't take him there, but if you would see that he has a decent grave, I don't know anything about burying anybody. I never buried anything, not even a sparrow. But you don't have to worry about the birds getting him. They aren't going to let the bodies hang over the holiday. He'll be dead and off the cross by evening." Barabbas began to curse under his breath. "I don't think you should worry about him, sir. He isn't worried. Jesus is taking him into paradise with him." Then he told Barabbas about the thing that had transpired between Jesus and Dismas. After he finished, there was a long silence, and when Barabbas spoke, his voice was full of wonder. "What kind of crucifixion is it where the dying can promise eternal life to another?" "This whole execution is different, sir. Everybody on the hill knows it's different. I think it's Jesus that is making it so." Another silence fell. Flies buzzed. The noise of the square was magnified in the confines of the alley. Vinegar Boy watched a line of ants making their endless trips up and down the side of the building. Then they both heard the ring of hobnails. The boots stopped on the sidewalk near the opening into the square. "Shh," Vinegar Boy warned Barabbas, and then made himself as small as possible in the shadows behind the stone columns of the steps. From outside, one of the soldiers called to his companions, "Hold up, Theo, I want to check in here." "Judging from the smell, you'll drown in a cesspool. Hurry up, I'm as dry as desert sand." Vinegar Boy held his breath. Part of the sunlight was blotted out. He heard the scraping of the Roman's breastplate and the clank of the short sword as they rubbed the walls. There was silence, and the boy knew that the soldier was letting his eyes grow accustomed to the dimness. Then muffled steps came toward the stairs. A fly buzzed about the boy's lips, but he did not dare blow it away. He was afraid to move. The soldier put his foot on the stone steps and started to ascend. When a rotten board bent under his waist, he stepped back quickly. From under the steps, the boy glanced up. Sunlight from the upper level illuminated the soldier. The chin, seen from below, was hard and ruthless. Flakes from the rotten steps sifted down. The boy closed his eyes. Something like the touch of fire stung his ankles, and he held back a startled cry. The line of ants was crossing his feet. He hated crawling things. He wanted to scream and slap at the ants, but if he did, he would betray Barabbas. He clamped his teeth. Then the soldier bent to peer behind the steps. Vinegar Boy seemed to shrivel within his rough, dark garment. The soldier's partner yelled for him to hurry, and the armor scraped again as the soldier went back to the street. From outside, the heavy voice was pleasant. "I still say it's a good place to hide if you have the nose of a marble statue. Once more around and we can have that mug of ale." They were gone. The boy crawled out, stamping his feet and brushing at the ants. "Have they gone?" Barabbas whispered. "Yes." Can you take time to get me some water? I don't know, sir. The gourds are all too big to get through the cracks of the door, and I can't take time to pull the bars off. If they see me bringing water, fill your boots. I drink water out of a dried rat's skin. The boy hesitated. He did not doubt that the outlaw needed water. It would take him only a few more minutes. He slipped back into the street. The water in the fountain sparkled and sang as he drank. He had not known he was so thirsty. The water was warmer than it had been earlier in the day, and he rinsed his face and poured the cooling liquid on his raw heels. There were small red dots where the ants had bitten. As he rinsed out his boots in the horse trough and then filled them with clean water, he felt eyes on his face. He looked up just in time to catch a woman's expression as she had a full look at his face. A flash of something hot and bitter and violent rose in his throat. Later he recognized it, the taste of hate. A bread seller passed with a loaded basket balanced on his head. The fragrance of the warm loaves made the boy's stomach squirm in hunger. His look betrayed him. The woman hailed the tradesman. She said something to him about the poor child and thrust a coin into his hand. He handed her a loaf. She shook her head. I couldn't bear to touch him, she said. The man with the bread turned and yelled, Hey, you there with the boots, catch this, a gift from the lady. The loaf spun through the air. Without thinking, the boy dropped the boots and grabbed for the bread. Then, as the boots fell and the water splashed, he snatched at them and missed the loaf. The tradesman laughed, and the woman began to complain about the boy's ingratitude and stupidity. Suddenly, he hated her. Worse than Phineas, worse than anyone he had ever known, he hated her. She was everyone who had ever laughed at him or looked at his face with pity, anyone who had ever hurt him and made him feel ashamed. She was all the men in the garrison who made sport of him and called him Liverface, all the boys in the school who had caused Nicholas to keep him at home and teach him the best he could. Hatred choked him, burned his throat, was bitter on his tongue. This was the way Barabbas hated the Romans, a killing hate. This must be the way the priests hated Jesus and wished him dead. The anger went as quickly as it had come. He shook with chills. The woman had gone, and the loaf lay in a puddle of water. He lifted it, tearing off the muddy part. Most of it was still crisp and warm. He laid it on the fountain lip and refilled the boots. Anger had taken his hunger away, but Barabbas needed bread. He held the loaf under his arm and the boots in either hand as he went back into the alley. Bending under the steps, he whispered to Barabbas. The outlaw pressed his mouth to the widest crack, and Vinegar Boy poured the water slowly. Then he broke the bread and passed the chunks to him. It fell in the water. A woman bought it for me. She thought I was a beggar. No matter how you got it, Jehovah provided it. Barabbas? Yes. I'm sorry I called you a murderer. That woman made me so mad, I wanted to kill her. I know how it feels to hate somebody so much that you want to hurt them. Barabbas stopped chewing. I hope you don't know, boy. I hope you never know. But I do. It makes you dirty and ugly all over. She saw my face and she called me stupid. I wanted to kill her. There was a deep silence. Then Barabbas spoke in a voice that might have soothed a sick child. You cannot help the way you were born. There is nothing ugly or stupid about you. His voice was gruff again. You've spent enough time with me. Get on about your errand. Do what you can for Dismas and tell him I would keep my promise if I could. And boy, the softness was back. If you ever need a father other than your Nicholas, let me know. Vinegar Boy picked up his boots, swung the tied laces around his neck, and began to climb the steps. He went quickly but with care, and when he reached the upper street, he was smiling. Lost my spot. Chapter 12. Vinegar Boy's happiness faded somewhat as he approached the Fortress Antonia. Well, look who's back. The butcher stood in the doorway of the commissary with a bucket of fish in one hand and a scaling knife in the other. If it isn't little Liverface himself. He spread his legs to block the entrance. Get out of my way, Phineas, Vinegar Boy said. I have to see Nicholas at once. The butcher sneered. He's busy. I do believe this is the same ugly boy with the same ugly face who left here this morning boasting about a miracle. Have you picked a name to match your new face? Vinegar Boy pressed his lips together and scrunched down, trying to squeeze past the butcher's legs. Phineas swung the bucket from side to side, nose high to the boy. The nauseating smell of slightly ripe fish hung in the doorway. The boy pulled back and said, Phineas, I'm warning you, get out of my way. Make me, you little... And he spat an ugly name like venom, and Vinegar Boy lowered his head and charged. He caught the butcher in the pit of the stomach and sent him stumbling backward. The bucket flew out the door and hit the bricks, scattering fish in the thin dust. Phineas let out a howl of rage and surprise as he was bowled over. Flinging up his arm, the scaling knife flashed across the boy's chest. The boot saved him. The blade glanced from the hard toe of the boot to his arm. He felt the fiery slash and screamed. Nicholas seemed to arrive out of thin air. He caught the whole story in one glance. The boy's frightened face, the blood oozing from his arm, the butcher on one knee with a furious look on his face, and the knife clutched in his hand. Nicholas bellowed. He lifted Phineas with both hands and slammed him into the wall. Phineas's eyes popped, his face mottled with red and purple. Vinegar Boy screamed, No, Nicholas, no! He didn't mean it! I'm not hurt! Phineas had let go of the knife and was clawing at the steward's hands. Then Nicholas dropped him like a bag of pig husks, and the butcher collapsed on the door sill, his face as clammy as one of his own plucked fowls. The steward examined the boy's wound with care. The cut was not deep. He squeezed the flesh gently to let the blood run freely. It really wasn't his fault, Nicholas. I had to see you in a hurry, and he wouldn't let me through the door. I butted him down. It's only a scratch. Nicholas insisted on cleansing the wound with turpentine and putting ointment and a bandage on it. As he did, the boy told him why he had come back to the commissary. As he explained that Jesus was the third man to be crucified, the steward's blue eyes filled with tears. The fools, they kill the vine of goodness and let the wild grapes flourish. And then, I'm sorry, boy. There's still time for him to help me, Nicholas. I just haven't been able to ask him yet. Marconius says he will have his power until he dies, and he is right. If you were up there, you would see. The steward listened as the boy told him quickly about John and Mary and Joseph of Arimathea and the need for aloes. I told them you would let us have some. Nicodemus is going to pay for them. The steward shook his head. I can't give them warehouse aloes, boy. Besides, our supply is all in 100-weight jars. Vinegar Boy was certain that he had failed to make himself clear. The aloes were for Jesus, the man of goodness, whom Nicholas admired. And the steward did not have to give the aloes. An honorable man intended to pay for them. But I am also an honorable man, Nicholas said. I cannot sell garrison stock without proper authority. Just this once? If Nicodemus were to appear before me this instant and offer me twice the market value for the jar, I could not let the aloes go, not without an order from the tribune or the governor. There's no way you can manage it just once? Nicholas shook his head. I'm sorry, boy. If they were mine, you could have them. This has been a disappointing morning for you, and I'm sorry. He tied the knot in the bandage and held the brown hand in his own. Seeing the entreaty in the amber eyes, his own pale blue eyes misted, but he shook his head. You'd be doing it for Jesus, sir. The bald head with its fringe of stiff white hair shook again. Then will you go with me to the tribune and help me explain? Maybe he would... Son, you know Rome better than that. But I promised. You were not thinking before you spoke. But Jesus would have healed me. He might do it yet if I get back before he dies. Please, Nicholas, he needs the aloes. No. The answer is no, boy, and that's final. Phineas had gathered up the scattered fish, and as usual, he had managed to hear the conversation. He passed them with a smirk and said, Let the fellow rot. It's no more than the rest of us have to look forward to. Vinegar Boy raised blazing eyes. "He is not going to rot. He is going to paradise. He said so." Nicholas put his hand on the boy's shoulder. "Quiet, son. He is right. Man returns to the dust." "Maybe you should come to the hill and then you'd see. You've never seen a crucifixion like this one. This isn't just an execution. Jesus told one of the other men on the cross that he would be with him in paradise today. Nobody rots in paradise. Rot is for dogs or fish." He glared at Phineas, who stood in the hallway holding a fish by the tail and grinning. "You'll rot too, you nasty old thing," Nicholas thundered. "That's enough, son." But the frustration of the morning would not be held back. Vinegar Boy turned on Nicholas. "Don't call me your son. I'm not your son. I don't belong to anybody. I'm just what he has always called me, a liver-faced bastard." The words burned like coal on his tongue, and when they were said, his lips were blistered and defiled. The steward's blow rang in the quiet corridor. The blood left the fair cheek and then came back red and furious as the colors in the dark cheek. The boy could not believe that Nicholas had struck him. Never in his life had Nicholas struck him. He raised his eyes, hurt, startled, confused. Nicholas stood ready to gather him to his chest, but the tears that sprang into the amber eyes were angry tears. "I'll get you an order for your old aloes. I know who will give it to me. He believes in Jesus even if you don't." The idea had come almost as quickly and violently as Nicholas's slap. The words tumbled over one another like grasshoppers. "I'm going to Pilate. He didn't want to kill Jesus. He thinks he's the king of the Jews. He said so. Just you wait. I'll be back." Before Nicholas could restrain him, Vinegar Boy was gone. The steward's shout echoed in the garrison grounds. In the doorway, the butcher cackled with laughter. And in the breast of the boy, shame burned as deeply as the determination. Nicholas had struck him, and Phineas had seen it. This was the depth of humiliation. He cried as he ran. He had been sent many times to the palace quarters in the fortress and had spoken to the governor many times as Pilate reviewed the troops or walked with his wife Procula on the balconies and porches. He liked Procula. He would find them. One did not burst into the governor's chambers without cause, but he had cause, and no one was going to stop him. He dashed up the marble steps and through the bronze portals, past the door porters who yelled for him to stop. Down carpeted corridors he fled, between heavy brocaded curtains, across wide mosaic chambers. He darted under the arms of guards and chamberlains who made attempts to grab him. Some who spoke of him later swore that he was a white-faced imp with eyes of blazing gold. Others, who glimpsed the dark side of his face, argued that they had seen a demon of darkness under whose skin blue and purple flames burned. His eyes had not been golden fire, but dark red coals. Still others, who saw the racing boy and the look of urgency upon his wet face, felt their hearts constrict. Surely this child had come with some great petition to the governor. Perhaps his father had been ordered to the galleys, or his mother was dying for want of medicine or bread, or perhaps a sister, beautiful and pure, had been snatched from the safety of the family. Whatever it was, they wished him well as his pounding feet carried him out of sight. For themselves, they went back to their daily tasks, knowing this was a bad day to sue for favors. Pilate had confined himself to his private bedchamber with a severe headache. He had called several times for basins of water, hot and cold, to bathe his brow. Only a few knew the truth. The governor of Judea, after turning Jesus of Nazareth over to the high priest Caiaphas to be crucified, had felt the pangs of conscience so severely that he was having mental upsets. He believed that his hands were covered with blood, so he dipped them constantly into the scouring ashes, the water, and the oil. Procula, his wife, bent above him, speaking comfort, but her own black eyes were dead as week old cinders. She was as stricken as Pilate. "I warned you. Oh, Pilate, my husband, I warned you. If only this once you had been strong enough to face up to them. This was a religious quarrel, and you had no right to interfere. My dream came, and my message was sent to save you from this infamy. Have nothing to do with this just man, for I have suffered much in a dream concerning him. I warned you." Pilate quivered and washed his hands again. Thus it was that the boy found them. He wasted no time in greeting, though he had heard the long and honorary salutations many times. He stopped in front of them, breathing fast, the tears on his cheek. The cut on his arm throbbed with every breath, and the bump on his head throbbed in unison with his arm. "Please, sir," he said as he went directly to the chair where Pilate sat slumped, "you must help me. You have given Joseph of Arimathea permission to bury Jesus of Nazareth, but we need aloes for the embalming. There are aloes at the brewery, sir." Procula's hands moved nervously across the front of her garment. The robe was of soft green silk, spotted in the front with water. Her nose was pinched and white in the middle of her tense face. She spoke to Pilate. "You have given him to his friends for burial? You did not tell me this." Pilate said nervously, "There was nothing definite. I told him we would see. I have no objection." Vinegar Boy rushed on. "Sir, Joseph is going to take him as soon as he is dead." Pilate looked up. "They must bring me proof. The centurion must send me proof that he is dead. This I insist upon." "He will be dead, sir. He is dying now. They will bury him in the gardens beyond the hill where the cypress trees are. I live with Nicholas at the commissary, and Procula said, "We remember you." "Nicholas won't let me have any aloes without an order, sir. They are in jars of 100 weight." "Am I never to be rid of this fellow?" Pilate murmured, almost to himself. "Look, boy," he held out his hands. "See, I can't get the blood off. I've tried and tried, but it will not wash off." The hands of the governor shook, but the boy could see no stains or blots, not even under the trimmed and polished nails. Looking into the quivering face and the colorless eyes, he understood. He looked at Procula, and her lips trembled. Vinegar Boy had seen this kind of illness before. Once a young recruit had returned from a foray against the rebels in the hills and had sat for a day in the sun with his hands trembling and a strange blueness about his lips. He would rub sand into his hands until they were raw, trying to remove the guilt of shedding human blood. The boy looked at Pilate's hands and said, "Yes, sir, I see it." Marconius had not argued with the young recruit that day, but he had tried to give him something else to think about. "Are you sure that's not ink, sir?" "Ink?" Pilate stared. "Ink?" Procula fastened her dark eyes on the boy, and he flushed. "Don't you remember the sign you wrote, sir? The one that said, 'This is Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews'? You sent it to the hill, sir. You signed it in ink." Pilate lifted his face. "I did. So I did. I had forgotten. They wanted me to change it. Caiaphas, the fox, practically ordered me to change it to read that Jesus had said he was King of the Jews, but I told him that what I had written. You see, wife, I can stand up to them when I so desire." Procula's tears washed over her face. Pilate said, "Have them fetch me another basin. Ink should not be so difficult to remove." He thrust a finger toward a desk in the corner of the room. "Fetch me my writing materials. You shall have your order for the aloes. Tell them it comes as a gift from Pontius Pilate." Vinegar Boy fetched the materials. His heart pounded. "Thank you, sir. You have done enough for him. They are saying on the hill that the sign is the wisest and bravest thing you could have done." Pilate's lips lifted. He held the pen in a steady grasp. "Did you hear, Procula? I've done well. Now," the pen scratched. "Aloes from the warehouse, 100 weight jar. There you are. Procula, hand me the basin." Vinegar Boy ran out as he had run in. This time he clutched the precious order against his chest. He had not failed John and Mary. He had not failed Jesus. And maybe if he hurried, Jesus would not fail him. That ends chapter 12.